Good morning. Hi, everybody. We are going to be turning in a Bible today. If you have one, or the Bible in the seat in front of you, you can turn to Matthew 21. I know I always need a little time to get there. My name is Julia. I usually serve in the kids ministry. You may have met me at the preschool classroom. I have little girls of my own that are 5 and 3, and their favorite thing about Lake Springs Church lately has been potluck. They love when you guys make lunch so much. It's their favorite thing. They'll cry if we go home without going to potluck. So I did want to just elaborate on what Vasti said, which is that we are having an egg hunt, but we are having lunch too, and you have been planned for. Even if you didn't bring something or you didn't know there was lunch today, you should plan right now that you're going to come to lunch, okay? And my daughter, my 3-year-old, we were at the playground yesterday. Kids had Easter baskets, and she very adamantly told them, "It is not Easter yet. It is not Easter yet." And she is right. Today is Palm Sunday. Okay, so we're going to read about Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. If you'll stand with me if you can, we're going to read Matthew 21. Now when they drew near to Jerusalem and came to Bethphage, to the Mount of Olives, then Jesus sent 2 disciples, saying to them, "Go into the village in front of you, and immediately you will find a donkey tied and a colt with her. Untie them and bring them to me. And if anyone says anything to you, you shall say, 'The Lord needs them,' and he will send them at once." This took place to fulfill what was spoken by the prophet, saying, "Say to the daughter of Zion, behold, your king is coming to you, humble and mounted on a donkey, on a colt, the foal of a beast of burden." The disciples went and did as Jesus had directed them. They brought the donkey and the colt and put on them their cloaks, and he sat on them. Most of the crowd spread their cloaks on the road, and others cut branches from the trees and spread them on the road. And the crowds that went before him and that followed him were shouting, "Hosanna to the Son of David. Blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna in the highest." And when he entered Jerusalem, the whole city was stirred up, saying, "Who is this?" And the crowd said, "This is the prophet Jesus from Nazareth of Galilee." This is the word of the Lord. You can be seated.
Well, if there's one thing I love in life, I have a lot of loves, but if there's one thing I love in life, it is trivia. I love trivia. If you ever want to go to a trivia night, call me. I will be your wingman, and we'll have fun. I love trivia, love Jeopardy, love all that stuff. But I especially love geography trivia. It's my favorite topic. I think the world is awesome, and geography trivia is a lot of fun. And so this morning as we begin, I want to play a little geography trivia with y'all, okay? I want to play some geography trivia, but instead of asking you questions or giving you stats to call out, I want to show you a video that'll be playing behind me, and I want you to try and guess what body of water this is, and you can call it out. I know this is church, but we can be loud. So go ahead and put that first video. And I'm curious if you have guesses of what body of water this is. I hear Lake Michigan. That's the only louder person I hear. You can call them louder than that. The Pacific Ocean, okay. There's a second video. Go ahead and put the second one up. Changes things a little bit. Any other guesses? Okay, Arctic Ocean. It's a good guess. There's some ice there. Now the answer, I don't think I heard, but some of you were a little quieter, so I don't think I heard. You can put the picture up. The answer is Lake Superior. What? I know, crazy. Lake Superior. I was born and raised in Michigan, so grew up in the Great Lakes state. And Lake Superior, if you're not familiar with it, Lake Superior is something that growing up, we were taught, and you just learned, you kind of developed this natural fear of Lake Superior. Like it was communicated to you in a sense that almost like one day it's just inevitable that Lake Superior claim your life. Lake Superior is just out to get you and is gonna claim you one day. But Lake Superior is interesting because if you've never been to the Great Lakes, if you've never experienced them before, lake is a poor word for them. They're basically, they're seas, they're like mini oceans. Like you stand on the edge of one and you cannot see land on the other side. Lake Superior is massive. And I want to give you some stats about Lake Superior. Lake Superior, if you don't know, if you've never been there, it's bigger in area than the state of South Carolina. Isn't that crazy? It has enough water to cover all of North and South America, 2 continents in a foot of water. Wow, what? I know. It is, the water temperatures are typically in the 30s to 40 degrees, and they have storm waves that can reach over 30 feet tall. Now, one of the crazy things about Lake Superior and the Great Lakes themselves is they can often be more dangerous than the ocean. And the reason for that is they're freshwater, okay? So I learned this week, didn't know this, but in the ocean is saltwater. I did know that, but the ocean is saltwater. And what happens is the salt kind of weighs down the waves, and it causes waves in the ocean to be smoother, to be more consistently, evenly spread out. But the freshwater of the Great Lakes, because there's no salt, the waves kind of rise in sharper peaks. They're like little mountains. They're more jagged. They come more erratically and more inconsistently, and it causes them to be more dangerous at times than even the oceans can be. In fact, there's been over 350 recorded shipwrecks on Lake Superior, the most famous of which you may be familiar with, the most famous of which was the sinking of a ship called the Edmund Fitzgerald. All right, the Edmund Fitzgerald, it sank on November 10th, 1975. So last year was the 50th anniversary of it. There's a picture of it just to see how huge it is. It is a 729-foot freighter that served to ship iron ore across the Great Lakes. And it was this massive ship that had been sailing for a long time, and it was known to be this big, massive ship. It was owned and built by Northwestern Mutual Life Insurance Company, of all things, which that I did not know. I was surprised about that. But it had been sailing for a while, and then on November 10th, 1975, it got caught in this massive storm on Lake Superior that had waves reaching 25 to 35 feet tall, and it sank almost suddenly, killing the entire crew. In fact, it was so sudden that no distress signal even went out. It had a partnership that was sailing as well that made it, but the waves or something happened that hit the Edmund Fitzgerald so suddenly that it sank with no distress signal going out. And with that was born a Michigan legend about the Edmund Fitzgerald, and with that became the story of one of the most famous shipwrecks in American history. In fact, it was so famous that the next year, in 1976, an artist named Gordon Lightfoot wrote a song about the Edmund Fitzgerald called The Wreck of the Edmund Fitzgerald, and it has this popular but haunting line that says, "Superior, they said, never gives up her dead when the gales of November come early." How haunting and tense is that? But you see, the problem with the Edmund Fitzgerald, the problem was not that they didn't know what they were doing. All right, so I've heard the story a lot growing up in Michigan, but never really looked much into it. And recently a book came out about it, and I was reading it, and it's fascinating. But the story is not that they were weak, that the ship was weak, or that the crew was inexperienced, or that they didn't know what they were doing. In fact, they had been sailing on Lake Superior for some time. The problem, at the end of the day, was no matter how much they prepared, no matter how much they did, at the end of the day, they underestimated the power of Lake Superior. At the end of the day, the power of Lake Superior was so strong that no matter how much they prepared, they were not prepared for it. See, they knew it was dangerous, but over time of sailing on it, they became familiar with it, and familiarity led to them underestimating Lake Superior. And as I'm reading about it and thinking about this, I cannot help but wonder the same about us when it comes to Jesus. That if our familiarity with Jesus, especially for those of us that have maybe been followers of Jesus for a long time, if our familiarity with him has caused us to underestimate Jesus. In fact, that's the question we're going to wrestle with today, is do we underestimate Jesus? In our knowledge of Jesus, do we... in our knowledge of Jesus, that's what I want from all of you sometimes. It's just a good yay. That's great. But in our knowledge of Jesus, do we diminish Jesus to his simplest form? Do we default to kind of the child storybook version of Jesus in our lives and only focus on the easy to accept, the widely known parts of Jesus? And in doing that, do we underestimate him? And if so, how do we properly understand Jesus this morning? So today we're going to be continuing our journey through the Sermon on the Mount. We're coming real close to the end of it. We'll finish it up next week on Easter. And we're going to be in Matthew chapter 7 today. So if you still have your Bibles out from Julia reading for us this morning, you can flip back a few pages. We're going to be in Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 7. And what we've been doing, especially if you're newer with us through this series, is we've been looking, we've started this in January, and we've been spending this first section of the year looking at the teachings of Jesus in the Sermon on the Mount, and using this as a way to say, who do we desire to be as a church, and who do we desire to be as individuals? And so we're looking at the teachings of Jesus as a way to see what kind of the Jesus way of living is, and that this is the way we are committing ourselves to living as Lake Springs Church. In fact, we're kind of considering these few months as like an extended membership class. That we're saying we've gone through our mission, our vision, our values as a church. And in the next few weeks, once we finish this up, we'll extend an invitation to you to join us in church membership. And if you don't know what that means, that's okay. Don't worry about it. We'll get into it. We'll explain what all that means. But right now, all you need to worry about is this is what we are committing ourselves to as Lake Springs Church, as us as the leaders, as the church as a whole, but what we're also asking you to commit yourselves to as well as members of Lake Springs Church. So we're looking at the Jesus way of living here in the Sermon on the Mount. And we're going to start this morning, Matthew chapter 7, starting in verse 7. Jesus says this. This is all the words of Jesus. He says, "Ask, and it will be given to you. Seek, and you will find. Knock, and the door will be opened to you. For everyone who asks receives, everyone who seeks finds, and to the one who knocks, the door will be opened." All right, so this is some of the most encouraging words of Jesus, right? If you're new to church, if you're new to Jesus, and you're hearing this is great news. This is encouraging words of Jesus. And his disciples, his followers, those that he is teaching are hearing this great news, that not only is God this all-powerful creator, but he is also a caring father whose children can go to him for help and provision. See, Jesus makes it clear that everyone who asks, who seeks, who knocks will receive. And it's funny, the emphasis here is not on, we often look at this, the emphasis is not on the asker. In other words, this is not saying if you ask the right way or if you do things the right way. The emphasis here is on the giver. The emphasis here is on the Father. That anyone who asks receives. And let's continue reading, because let's continue reading in verse 9 to see kind of a real-world example or kind of a real-world illustration maybe for what this looks like. Verse 9. "Which of you, if your son asks for bread, will give him a stone? Or if he asks for fish, will give him a snake? If you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him?" So Jesus gives this human example. He says that, look, if you have children and your son, your daughter, your child asks for food, you're not going to give him a rock or a snake. You're not going to give him something useless or something dangerous. You will provide. And if we, in our sinful and wicked at times and selfish ways, if we can do that, how much more can our perfect and loving Father do that for his children? How much more? See, this is an invitation to reevaluate how Jesus' hearers were viewing God. To reevaluate how they view God. Because if we only view God as this all-powerful creator, which we have a tendency to do, then we're underestimating who God is. Because he is also this loving Father. And we can have a tendency to fall heavy on one side or the other. We can look at him as this all-powerful creator of the universe, amazing creator, and forget about the loving Father side. And when we do that, we underestimate who Jesus is. Or we can go far to the other side and just think of him as this caring Father, and in doing so, forget his power and his majesty and how incredibly awe-inspiringly massive God is. And when we do that, we underestimate who God is. See, God is this powerful creator, but he is also a loving Father. And if we continue reading in verse 12, we get kind of the implications of what that means in our lives. If we believe this, then what do we do with it in verse 12? "So in everything, do to others what you would have them do to you." This sums up the law and the prophets. See, if this is the type of love we have received from the Father, then this is what we should show to others as well. If we really believe that we've received this kind of love, then we can show it to others as well. And Jesus is saying this statement sums up the law and the prophets. That's his way of saying this sums up the Old Testament, the Hebrew scriptures, the scriptures in the time of Jesus. That it all boils down to doing unto others as you would have them do unto you. In fact, Jesus wasn't alone in this thinking or this idea. There's a story of a rabbi who lived around the time of Jesus. And the story goes that a Gentile approached this rabbi and told him, "Look, I will convert if you can teach me the Torah while standing on one foot." The entire Torah, the first 5 books of the Bible. If you teach them to me standing on one foot, I will convert. So the rabbi, he lifted his foot. He said, whatever you do not want someone to do to you, do not do that to your neighbor. That is the whole law. Everything else is just explanation. See, everything boils down to this, because if we treat our neighbor the way that we want to be treated, we all want to be treated with love and not hollow love, not fake love. If we want to be treated with real and experience real love, and if we treat our neighbor in that way, we're treating image bearers of God that way, and when we treat others that way, we treat God that way as well. And see, this is how we bring the kingdom of God down here to earth. We've been talking about this idea of in Holly Springs as it is in heaven, that we want to be little pockets of the kingdom right here in Holly Springs. And this is how we do it, simply by treating others the way we want to be treated. This is one of the most basic things that we teach to our children. This is something that just about the majority of religions and beliefs agree on this, that we just treat others the way that we want to be treated. But with that in mind, I want us to backtrack a second. I want us to jump back up to verse 11. And I want us to camp out there for a few minutes, because there's a challenge that's really easy to miss in verse 11. There's something that we can read past and just keep reading, and we can really miss what's being said here and the challenge that's presented to us there. All right, so let's read verse 11 again. He says, if you then, though you are evil, know how to give good gifts to your children, how much more will your Father in heaven give good gifts to those who ask him? All right, listen, if we believe one part of this, we have to wrestle with the other. If we believe one part, we have to wrestle with the other. If we believe that God will answer those who seek him, will answer those who ask, then we have to wrestle with the idea and with the belief that his response is always good. It's easy to say God will always respond or God will always answer those who ask of him, but then we really have to wrestle with the idea is, do we believe that God's response is always good? Because I don't know about you, but if I'm being honest with you and if you're being honest with me, there have been many prayers that I have prayed that were not answered in the way that at the time, in the way that I would have wanted them to be answered. I could probably stand up here and share with you a number of those times, but I want to share one specific that has always stood out to me of a time that I prayed for something, that prayer was answered, but not in a way that I would have called good at the time. Well, my family, my wife and I were foster parents, and there was a little girl that lived with us a few years back. In fact, when we first started attending Lake Springs Church in 2022, she was with us, and many of you, if you were around back then, you knew her. Some of you may have even watched her in her class. But she came and lived with us from the hospital, so we got her as a baby, just a couple, maybe a week old. She was in the NICU, so we went and lived with her in the NICU for a little bit until she was discharged and she came home. And when she came home, from the very beginning, mom, for her, was not in the picture. Just kind of, after she got out of the hospital, left and never looked back. So mom was never in the picture. But dad, at the time when she got out of the hospital, was in prison. So virtually from day one, adoption talks were happening. The social workers and so forth were asking us if we'd be interested in adoption. And we said we would, and we'll just see what happens. And then a little bit of time went on. Dad got out of prison, wanted to meet her. So we got in touch with him, invited him. He came to church with us and met his daughter in church for the first time. He had never seen her before. And so we went to church together. We met her, then went to McDonald's, and they played together, and it was very nice. And over time went on. Dad kept making little improvements, kept doing the things he was supposed to be doing. But all this time, we were basically told the odds of a single dad doing everything needed to reunite with their child is pretty slim. And also the fact that he was in prison and just getting out, basically we were told is like, it's not impossible, but I've never seen it happen. And so even though he was doing good things and making some progress, the conversation continued to be between us and the social workers, continued to be adoption. And that seemed to be the way that we continued to work towards. And my prayer to God was the same prayer that I pray for every one of the dozens of kids that have come through our house. The same prayer of God, protect these kids, whatever that looks like. God, let your will be done in their life. But what I meant by that was, God, protect these kids, or protect her, and I know what is the best way to protect her. Protect her by keeping her here. You see, time went on, and her dad kept doing things, the right things, and we kept kind of having to assist, not having to, but getting to assist in helping him get her back almost. Like we were teaching him how to change diapers, how to buckle up car seats, how to do all these things that were good things, and we wanted him to learn because we wanted him to be in her life. We wanted that to happen, but not so much that would mean that she would leave our house. And even though these talks of adoption kept continuing just before her second birthday, so just shy of 2 years of being with us, 2 years of being called mom and dad, 2 years of being sister to my son, after 2 years, seemingly overnight, seemingly in the blink of an eye, plans change and she moves. So suddenly that we barely even got to say goodbye. And I am not exaggerating at all when I tell you that killed me. I remember, and it is seared in my brain, when I was told that she was not coming back, and I felt like my soul left my body. I felt hollow. That Sunday, we were attending here, I was on staff here, and I wanted nothing less than to come to church. But my wife, in her wisdom, she's like, we need to go. That's the place we need to be. So the last thing I wanted was to come and walk in with one less of our family and have people ask, where is she? So I agreed to come if we come late. So we came in late, snuck in, didn't talk to anyone. I sat right in the middle of the auditorium. I went back and forth between being seethingly angry and weeping. And then we left before service ended so no one could say anything to us. You see, I had been praying something to God, but I didn't mean what I was praying. My prayer, this isn't what I was saying, but my prayer was, God, my will be done. God, I know what is best. God, my will be done, not yours. But you see, against all odds, and that's not even a turn of phrase, but literally against all odds, her dad kept doing the things that need to be done. He stayed sober. He got work. He stayed employed. He got a stable living situation. He stayed out of trouble. And after all odds, he was able to reunite with his daughter and be a family again. And this turned out to be one of the most beautiful and incredible reunification stories we've ever had the pleasure of being a part of. And he has since he has since brought her to us to see her, and we talked and gotten pictures, and they're happy together, and they're healthy, and it is the way that it should have gone. It was clear now with hindsight that God was working in every step of the way. God was orchestrating it all, and God was protecting her. God was answering my prayers of protection for her. He answered those clear as day. But in the time that I was in the middle of it, I would have never said that God's response was good. I would have never said that God's answer to my prayer was good until we got to see the whole picture. See, God did answer my prayers. He gave us good gifts. He gave her good gifts. He gave him good gifts, even when those gifts did not seem good at the time. So we continually seek God. We ask, yes, but we seek him as well. We seek that his will be done in our lives, not our own, because he knows what is the ultimate best. But what happens when we stop seeking God? When we ask, but we stop actually seeking him? See, today we celebrate Palm Sunday. We celebrate the triumphal entry of Jesus into Jerusalem. And if we look at the story of Palm Sunday, we see this beautiful and exciting story of Jesus entering Jerusalem. But at the same time, we get this kind of tragic warning about what it looks like to underestimate Jesus. Palm Sunday is often read as this joyful celebration, and it is, but it's also a warning about what it looks like when we do not seek Jesus. When we ask, but we stop seeking. See, in Matthew 21, which Julia read for us earlier, we see Jesus coming into Jerusalem, as many of the Jewish people were doing. This was right before Passover, as they're making the pilgrimage back to Jerusalem. And word about Jesus had spread. He's this healer. He's this teacher. He claims to be the Son of God. And now he's coming and entering Jerusalem. And right around this time, right around Passover, Pontius Pilate would have been making an appearance. Because Passover is this feast of freedom. It's a time when they can celebrate their freedom from slavery. The Jewish people can celebrate the Israelites being freed from slavery. And in the midst of this celebration, Pilate would have made himself seen as a reminder that despite their freedom, they're still living under Roman rule. And so tensions would be high in the midst of this season. Tensions would be running high. And right in the middle of that, Jesus enters Jerusalem in what looks almost like a military victory parade. People have been waiting for this Messiah to come and deliver them from oppression, to free them from the rule of the Romans. And here comes this healer and miracle worker that claims to be the Son of God, and they assume that he's going to be that deliverer. And the people greet him by laying down palm branches. By laying down palm branches, which is something that was historically done after a military victory. They cry out singing, Hosanna, Hosanna. Hosanna literally means save us, please. They're crying out, save us, but they're not saying save us from our sins. They're saying save us from oppression. Save us from what we think we need to be saved from. See, despite what they heard and saw from Jesus, they completely underestimated him. They completely saw Jesus the way that they wanted to see him, and they thought that he was coming to provide physical deliverance. They thought he was coming to provide physical deliverance, but he came for something much, much greater. He came to provide them with spiritual deliverance. They asked for a Messiah. They asked, but they didn't seek who Jesus really was. They asked for a Messiah, but they were unwilling to accept the good gift that God had given them in Jesus. They asked for this political leader, but Jesus came as something that was far, far greater. And instead of recognizing this good gift from God, the same people that cried Hosanna as he walked in would soon be the ones crying out, crucify him. See, they underestimated what Jesus was capable of and reduced him to only serving their physical, earthly needs. And we can be just like this sometimes, can we not? We ask, we pray, but we're unwilling to learn what God's plan really is and recognize the good gifts that God has given us, the good gifts that God gives when he answers our prayers according to his will, not our own. See, we, like the people in Jerusalem, like to think that we have it all figured out, that we have the answers about what we need from God, that we know best, I know what is best, and God, I need you to make that happen. But remember one of the first lines from the Lord's Prayer that we looked at just a few weeks back. The Lord's Prayer, the way we are taught to pray, our Father in heaven, hallowed be your name, your kingdom come, your will be done. Your will be done. Part of being a disciple of Jesus is recognizing that God's will is a good gift, even when it doesn't feel like it at the time. So take a look back at the Sermon on the Mount. Take a look back at the section that we were reading. Look what Jesus says right after the section we just read, starting in verse 13. Look at the next words that Jesus says. Enter through the narrow gates, for wide is the gates and broad is the road that leads to destruction, and many enter through it. But small is the gates and narrow the road that leads to life, and only a few find it. See, living life with the mindset of I know best, living life with the mindset of I know what is best, and God, I need you to do that for me, that is the easy way of life. That is the easy way. That is what most people do. And that is that's kind of our instinctual way of living, but look where that leads us. But the narrow path that leads to life, the narrow path that leads to Jesus, comes only by continued submission and reliance on him. And that is who we want to be as a church. That is the way we want to live, we desire to live as Lake Springs Church and as individuals here, as we look at the Jesus way of living and the type of church that we desire to be, and what it looks like to be a member of Lake Springs Church. In other words, a way that we can also hold each other accountable to live this way. We are committing to valuing teachability here at Lake Springs Church. That we want to live with a teachable spirit. That we desire to have a teachable, seeking spirit. We want to remain humble, receptive, and open to God's wisdom, continually seeking and knocking as learners of Jesus. That is who we desire to be. We desire to be people that do not claim to know it all, that do not claim to have it all figured out, but claim to worship someone that does. See, this is the posture of a disciple. This is what we desire to be, a learner of Jesus, the posture of a disciple. A disciple is someone who is humble enough to ask. Claiming that I know what is best. Not claiming that my will is best, but I'm humble enough to ask. I'm hungry enough to seek. I'm desperate for Jesus. I want to seek him out. I'm hungry enough to seek and persistent enough to knock. That we continually chase after Jesus for a lifetime. There is no making it. There is no destination. It is a continual seeking after Jesus for a lifetime and a lifetime of being teachable to him, and learning from him. See, I love food. And shortly, we are going to go outside. And the smells are probably almost coming through the building. I know what's out there, and it is going to be great. I love food. In fact, people ask, what's your favorite food? And I will often say, that's an impossible question. There is no, all food is great. There's no such thing as bad food. Food is a good gift from God, and I love food. And I love watching stuff about food. Amen, that's right. I love food. I love watching stuff about food. I love food documentaries, all right? And there's a really good food documentary that you should watch. And it'll tie in, trust me. But especially if you love long, slow shots of sushi, all right? It's a documentary called Jiro Dreams of Sushi. It's really good. It came out, I think maybe 2011 or so. It came out a number of years back. But it's really great. And it's about this elderly sushi chef that runs this exclusive 10-person sushi restaurant in a Tokyo subway station. And it goes through his process for running the restaurant, what he does, but it also goes through the process of bringing on chefs to prepare with him, which is extremely rigorous process. All right, so to apprentice at Jiro's, you first start off by cleaning, obviously. But the first task you're really given, the first responsibility you're given, is you learn how to squeeze hot towels. Done. I mean, you learn how to squeeze hot towels. The hot towels are given to guests, and if they're the wrong temperature, they could burn them. And so you just spend time just squeezing hot towels for guests. But then you move on. As you move on to preparing rice. That's the first real food responsibility you're given, to preparing rice. Rice is a foundational aspect for them. So apprentices spend years perfecting rice. In fact, some of them will spend 3 to 5 years doing nothing but washing rice every day. Just washing rice for years. And then they move on to preparing rice. See, a few months back, I like sushi, and I decided I want to start learning how to make it. And I just put my rice in the rice cooker, and it's done in 15 minutes. It's done. But they spend years just washing the rice, just learning how to perfect this system that's been going on long before them. And then after years of doing that, they begin handling fish. And every cut, every piece is analyzed for perfection. In fact, Jiro in it says that their goal is not consistency. Their goal is that every single bite is better than anything they've ever made before. That's the level that they're going for. And so they spend years perfecting, handling, cutting, serving this fish. And then eventually you move on to what is apparently the most difficult task, which is making this egg sushi. It's this big, like, fluffy omelet that you make that's cut into pieces, that's put on a little pad of rice with nori wrapped around it, and it's apparently incredibly difficult to make. And it interviews this apprentice who says he spends months and months making hundreds and hundreds of batches of this, and every one of them is denied. And so finally, after hundreds of attempts, he made one that was good enough. And he said that when Jiro tried it and said it was good, he wept. See, you spend 10 to 20 years just in the learning process, just learning how to do this craft, learning, sitting under the master, sitting under the one who's done it for a long time. In fact, they talked about in the documentary Jiro's own son who was learning from him and sitting under him. And now here we are, however many years later, he's 66 years old, his son, 66 years old, still sitting under and learning from his father, who last year turned 100 and is still showing up working every day at the restaurant. In fact, the son said that he cannot wait for him to retire so he can take over. And his son is almost at retirement age now. Isn't that crazy? But they spend years, almost seemingly a lifetime, just learning how to perfect this craft. And the interesting thing about it is that for those that are learning, for those that are apprenticing, there's no assumption that they know what is best. There's no assumption that you should be higher than you are. You are submitting to those who know better than you. You see, this is having a teachable spirit. That regardless of where we come from or how much we think we know or how much we think we understand, that we need to submit to Jesus, to humbly seek him, to acknowledge that we do not have all the answers, to acknowledge, as hard as it may be, that there are things that we might be wrong about. There are secondary and kind of tertiary issues that come up in doctrine and in faith, and they are important, and they are good things, but we can sometimes have a tendency to hold on to these lesser issues and hold them on to them and grit our teeth and just cling to them. But this is an invitation to let go a little bit. To not let go completely, but to open our hands a little bit and submit to Jesus and say, I might be wrong about something. I have news for you. There may come a time where I say something to you that is wrong. I don't believe it either, I know. And there may be a time where you disagree with me. And at the end of our lives, it may be that we're both wrong. But the goal of having a teachable spirit is to not claim that I know it all, to not claim that I've arrived, that through my learning and my books and my education that I've reached this point where I don't need to learn anymore. But we're always wanting to be students and disciples of Jesus, always learning, always learning. See, our culture has such a heavy dependence or heavy focus on self-sufficiency. That we should be able to do what is best for us. We should be able to provide for ourselves, and we are self-sufficient. But hear me when I say teachability begins where self-sufficiency ends. Being teachable to Jesus is admitting that I cannot be self-sufficient, that I cannot do it all on my own, that I need to rely on somebody else, and that somebody else is Jesus. A teachable spirit says, I cannot be self-sufficient, but I'm wholly and fully dependent on Jesus. See, this is your invitation today. It's your invitation to sit at the feet of the rabbi, sit at the feet of Jesus, to not try and weather the storms of Lake Superior on your own, not try and weather the storms of life on your own. Don't underestimate life so much to think that you can handle it on your own, but at the same time, don't underestimate Jesus to assume that you don't need him to handle life. We cannot handle this life on our own. It's too hard. But we were never invited to handle life on our own. We were invited to come to Jesus and say, I cannot handle it on my own, and I need to rely on the teacher. Rather, let us be lifelong learners of Jesus, never underestimating him enough to assume that I know what is best, but to trust in the good gifts that God provides, even when they don't feel good at the time. See, as we leave today, as we leave here in just a handful of minutes and go outside and have our fun, have the Easter egg hunt, eat a bunch of good food, celebrate with each other, have a good time together, let us do that. Let us celebrate. Let us have a great time, but let us not go into our celebration and just do this as an empty gesture. Let's not do this just because it's time to party, because it's time to have fun. Let us not be like the people on Palm Sunday who are celebrating Jesus for all the wrong reasons and underestimating who Jesus really is. See, Jesus is not just this wise teacher. He is not just one way to a good life. He is the way, the truth, and the life, and there is no way to the Father except through him. Let us not underestimate Jesus. Let us celebrate that we've been invited to sit at the feet of the rabbi and spend our lives learning from him. See, we've been invited, as our mission statement says, we've been invited to be with Jesus. And let us leave today being with Jesus as we go out and celebrate, as we go out into our lives. Let us be with Jesus with the goal of submitting to him, not doing it on our own, but submitting to the teacher. Would you bow and pray with me? Jesus, this life is hard. Jesus, you know there are many in this room that are going through things that are incredibly difficult. Jesus, I know some of them, but you know way more of what people are going through and how hard life can be and how much life can beat us down sometimes. But Jesus, thank you that you do not ask us to go through this alone. In fact, you don't want us to go through this alone. But you've invited us to come and sit at your feet, to spend our lives learning from you, to receive the good gifts from the Father of his will being done in our lives. God, that is a good gift. When your will is done, that is the best gift we could receive, but sometimes it is hard for us to recognize. God, teach us how to recognize when your will is done. Teach us to recognize the good that comes from your will, especially when your will conflicts with our will. Jesus, thank you for dying for us. Thank you for not leaving us in our states, but coming and rescuing us. Jesus, be with us today. It's in your name that we pray. Amen.